It's on.
I really wish I could say good morning, but there's no good on a day like today about the circumstances that led us here. And our hearts go out to Kim and John and Barry and the grandmas, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the family. This is a profound tragedy and loss. But the family wants today to remember their son, their grandson, their nephew, their cousin, as a young man who brought good wherever he went, a young man who brought kindness and empathy wherever he went. And although this may sound a bit odd, I want to give you permission to laugh today. If you ever got to have a meal with Brock and his papa, it was nothing but shenanigans with those two. If you talk to Brock's friends, wherever he was, there was laughter, there was joy, there was humor. If you talk to the poor girls who worked with him at the bin burger, he was always giving them a hard time and laughing and playing jokes with them. If you talk to his uncles who watched him grow up as a little boy, he was full of comedy and joy and delight. So we're going to remember that today too. But as we begin, I'm going to ask you to join me in a prayer of thanks. Lord, you give us many, many gifts. And it just seems like yesterday that Barry and Kim brought this beautiful little boy into the world. And we thank you for that wonderful life. That life of kindness and joy and empathy and laughter. A young man who cared deeply for the well-being of others. Who had planned a career and a future in helping others. We thank you for the great joy that he brought to his mom and to John, to Barry, to his grandparents and his great-grandma, to his uncles, his cousins, and to his friends. A life that made this world a much better place for him in it. So we thank you for this precious gift. And I pray, Lord, today that you would help us to honor him well. And Lord, that you would just be with us. Amen. I'd like to invite John to come and share a few words.
Thank you everyone for coming. Barry, Brock's dad, got a hold of me and sent me an email and asked me to say a few words on his behalf. So if you indulge me here. This is from Barry Beck. I'd like to thank the Minister Cal for his empathy and everyone attending the service today. I held Brock when he was born in Brantford, Ontario. It was my biggest accomplishment in my life. I was so proud to be his father and tried my best to guide him in the most positive direction. I had a lot of help from John Malick, Barry Beck, who loved him as a son, and also were father figures and mentors to Brock. His mother Kim was a strong force in his life and gave him independence and a loving personality. She supported him she was supported by her mother Donna, who loved Brock as her own. We love Brock as he only wanted to help others, which confirmed by the way he was going in the University of Nova Scotia to study mental health and recovery. He had finally found his path in life. Our families are heartbroken as we grieve the loss of Brock together. And this day, to our beloved Brock, and begin the healing process for our families, his friends, and the community of Binbrook. Brock Cameron Beck will have a legacy that will not be forgotten. You will hear of his journey as well. You will hear of his journey as he will continue helping others in his passing. My son, you will forever be a shining light in my heart for eternity. God bless my Savior Jesus Christ. May he comfort you in his arms. I pray that my mother would ask Brock to say a prayer that my mother would ask Brock to say before bed. I think we all know this one. We can say it together. Now I lay me down to sleep. Pray, Lord, my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Thank you. We love you, Brock. You're in our world. I'd like to thank Julie from the Donald V. Brown Funeral Home and their beloved, and for their love and support. God bless. Love conquers all. Mary you back. Thank you for all being here and supporting us. My family, my friends, our family. Gal.
John, that was a very kind gift. And Barry, thank you for those words and for writing that. Brock was born, it just doesn't seem like too long ago to Kim and to Barry, and his first few years in life were in Brantford. And when he was a little guy, he loved his Lego. If a new Lego set would come in, he would quickly get it and start putting it together, much to the amazement of his dad, who was sometimes befuddled by the instructions. And it would seem that Brock loved to lay little traps for his dad, and he would strategically lay Lego pieces between Dad's bedroom and the bathroom, only to hear Dad howl at night when he stepped on him. But he took his Lego and building very seriously. When Bob the Builder was on, or Tim the Tool Man, he had to watch those shows. It was a wonderful time growing up in Brantford, because Grandma and Papa were just around the corner. And Uncle Dave and Uncle Rich were there, and it was a wonderful life to be loved and to be cared for. I imagine the banter started with Brock and his Papa as they would drive over to the Three Bears Nursery, a banter that continued throughout their lives, full of laughter and jokes and silliness. For a while, they moved to BC, and then when Brock was about 7, the family relocated to Hong Kong. And that was a time of tears. It was all different. There wasn't the skate parks, there wasn't his friends, and the academic system in Hong Kong took their schooling very seriously, and Brock just wanted to be a kid. And as he learned to swim back home in Brantford, his mom found great consolation in taking him swimming every day. And it was a great joy. But by the time he was just about 7 or 8, he had been quite a world traveler. And one of the more eventful trips happened in 2002. Brock's just over 2 years old, and his dad and mom fly out for the hockey all-star game, and the flight out went great. All the hockey wives loved Brock, and he was such a cute little guy, enamored with their diamond rings, and everything went well until the morning to fly home. As things worked out at the hotel, Brock didn't quite get his breakfast. And if you've ever been around a toddler and they don't get their breakfast, they're not the happiest kids. And it started on the bus ride to the airport. The crying, the screaming, and it continued for a while, because where do you get milk and cookies on a bus? And let's just say that was a very, very long flight home. But a few years later, Brock had his first love in life. It was his great aunt Rosie, Papa's younger sister. He was enamored by that lady, and he just loved to be with her. And to watch the two of them together was just an absolute joy. Life changed a little bit, and he and his mom came back from Hong Kong and started a new life in Brantford. And that was nice because it was family around. And it was quite a thing to spend so much time with Uncle Dave and Uncle Rich, and they were great uncles. Dave remembers one Halloween going out with little Brock and his daughter, Taylor, and Brock had made his own Halloween outfit with his mom. Now remember, there was a lot of red, there was a box on his head with LED lights, and he was some sort of robot, and he scored pretty good on the candy that night. And during this time in Brantford, Mom met a pretty wonderful guy. His name was John. And soon there was a lovely connection. And soon this wonderful romance began, and love happened. And it was no surprise to John's family what a great dad he became. His sister Barb knew what a great guy her brother was. When she had been through a challenging time, Brother John moved in. And what a great uncle he has been to Matthew and Amanda. Pretty good cook too. And when they met Kim and they met this little guy named Brock, they realized there was this wonderful connection. And to see their uncle, her brother, become a dad, it was such a gift and such a joy. Soon they relocated to Binbrook. At that time, it was a pretty quiet place. They got to watch Brock grow up. As a little guy, he got into everything. As a Beck, of course, he played hockey, but he also enjoyed baseball and soccer and other sports, but it was pretty frustrating because he would often lament to his grandma, everybody's bigger than me. And we got a great big hulking dad who's 6'3" and a former professional hockey player. You want to be big like your dad. And it was challenging, and until he was 16 years old, he was pretty average to the shorter side. And then it happened, the growth spurt. All the way up to 6'3". And then he would lament to his grandma, Grandma, I want size, how do I get bigger? And Grandma would say, you know, you get tall, and then when that happens, you slowly fill out, just give it time. And around this time, he did a trip with his dad to New York City. There was a hockey school that was put on by one of Dad's friends, Mike Beckman, and it was pretty amazing because for Brock and these other teenage boys, they went to Times Square, and there are all these, well, let's face it, mostly naked women with this paint on. And Brock said, I gotta get a picture with this, and Barry saying, this isn't like the days in New York when I played here. But Brock, who hadn't played hockey for a while, decided, you know what? My dad's friend, Mikey, he said I could do it, so he did it. So here is Brock, hasn't played hockey for a while, doing 2-a-day on ice sessions, one a day dry land sessions, and he worked his ass off. Sometime in the week he pulled a groin, and I don't know if you've ever pulled a groin, but it's agony. And I want you to think about this scene. Here we got a hotel room. We got Dad in one chair, we got a son sprawled out on the couch with the other, with a bag of ice on his crotch, just trying to get through it. But you know, he never complained. At the end of the week, it was an exhibition game, and there was a team up from the States, and they had a forward who had a cannon for a slap shot. Now again, Brock didn't go there to play hockey, he went there to see his dad and hang out. So he kind of had a piecemeal hockey outfit on. Well, during the exhibition game, wouldn't you know it, the big forward winds up, drills the slap shot, it goes right off Brock's shin. He made his way over to the bench, sat down, didn't say anything. Dad kind of quietly sidles over and goes, you okay? Because Dad knew he did not have the top line equipment. Just nodded his head and said, yeah. Never complained. That's a tough kid. As the camp finished, there was a presentation made to Mike Backman, and Barry had picked up a real fake Rolex, which is the thing to do in Hong Kong. And he got the, nice wooden box, and he had, Brock make this big presentation to Mike, and about 6 months later, Mike calls Barry and goes, hey, that watch your kid gave me, it doesn't work. And Barry and Brock had a good laugh from it. But Barry had an interesting influence, as Grandma would say, on his son. He taught him to have expensive taste and to like nice things. And one day, Brock was out visiting his dad in BC, and his dad said, well, let's do some shopping and we'll hit the mall, and thinking they would come home with many bags of stuff. Well, he gave Brock some money, and wouldn't you know it, he goes into the mall and he sees a designer shop. And then he watches his son go into the shop, and he's thinking, what are you doing here, kid? And he sees his son going through these very expensive designer bags, Versace bags. And he's thinking to himself, come on, kid, don't blow all your money on just one bag. Let's leave this mall with a bunch of stuff. But no, Brock had a very specific taste. He wanted a bang for his buck, and a very stylish black Versace leather bag was it. He bought it. But that was Brock. He liked what he liked. He wanted quality, he wanted good things. And he took money seriously. Worked, saved his money, used his money, and he was that kind of kid. You never see him shopping in Walmart because that wasn't really his place unless he had to get batteries or socks. But one of the big things he wanted in life was a car. When he was 16, he was able to get his license, and I'm sure that was a bit of an adventure because poor Mom was the transit system for him up there. She drove him everywhere, and I'm sure Mom was pretty excited when he got his license too. I imagine the day, the first time John threw him the keys to his great big 350 Ford Harley-Davidson edition, which is a massive vehicle. It probably scared the life out of Brock behind that wheel. As did the day he was driving with his dad in his Dodge Challenger, and that might have scared the life out of Barry, who was not a very good front seat driver. But Brock's first big purchase was his Ford when he was out east. He saved his money, he hunted around, and he got himself a car, that Ford Fusion that he was so proud of. And how he ended up in Nova Scotia is quite a story. He was a young man that did not particularly enjoy school, especially his high school years. And he went because you had to go, and his friends went there. And as he finished his time in high school, he was going to take a gap year. Well, Grandma is a force of nature, and she was not going to hear any of that. Her grandson is not going to take a gap year, which turns into nothing afterwards, and you're not going to go back. So she pulls out her iPad and she starts going through community college courses and university courses. And she sees one that she thinks might be a good fit. So she sat Brock down and she showed him the different courses at the Nova Scotia Community College. And he saw one that caught his eye. It was the program for mental health and recovery. And it was a program that helps you help others who are going through things. And for Brock, this was very, very personal. He had seen friends go through things. He had seen family go through things. And he thought, this is how I can make a difference to my life. So he heads out east and he starts college. And one of the professors kind of took a look at him and got talking to him a little bit and thought, well, this kid's probably not going to last very long. And wow, was that person wrong. Brock got 80s and 90s. He was a young man who threw himself into his program. And not only did he graduate, but he did incredible things in that. There's a program that I'll talk about later that Brock and his friends were instrumental in setting up as an online help program, because he wanted his life to be a life that helped others. And to not just do it as a friend and a peer, but to do it vocationally and professionally. And friends, I could go on and tell stories, but I want to be kind to your time. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk about 3 gifts that Brock has given you. And the first gift is a gift of friendship. It wasn't hard to tell why Brock was so well liked when you spent time with him. He was funny. He was engaging. He was that guy you wanted as a friend for any number of reasons. And when you talk to his friends, they tell you about this guy who was always happy, always upbeat, always positive, always had a joke, a funny story. He was that guy that got you laughing and kept you laughing. But he was more than just the funny guy. He was that loyal guy. That loyalty he learned from his mom. He was that friend who stuck with you on the good days, that friend who stuck with you on the bad days. That friend that just cared about you. One of those particularly powerful friends was Sean. They'd been to high school together, they'd lost contact, and then they had contact again a few years later. And for Sean, it was nice to re-engage with a friend who cared about you, who engaged you, who was there, as Sean would describe it, on his absolute worst days, and then on his best days. For Sean's mom and dad, what a blessing it was to have Brock in their son's life. It was like another son to them, hanging out, having a helicopter mom, going fishing, going out on a boat. And what a gift it is to see your son be loved by a friend. And if you talk to those friends, they would tell you, Brock could push your buttons. If you had a fault or a weakness, he'd love to tease you about it. But he cared about you. And if you're one of those poor ladies like Aaliyah Anova who worked with him at the burger bin in Binbrook, you know he just took great delight in teasing you. But you also know he cared about you. Spending time with his friends was often just simple stuff, being in the Binbrook Conservation Area, tubing, fishing, relaxing, just hanging out. And I think gently, if Kim and John and Barry, as Brock's parents, could say one thing to those friends, I think they would want to say, make good choices in your life. Make wise choices with your life. Work hard, go to school, don't waste this precious gift of life that you have. Choose to help others and make a positive difference in the world around you, as Brock modeled for you. The second gift I'd like to talk about is that incredible gift of caring for people in practical ways. I don't think we ever know the impact we have on others until days like this happen. The last person to visit yesterday was a young man, and as he got out of his car in the parking lot, he was handsome, had a suit on. He looked at Kim and he came over to her. He hesitated and he said, "Your son saved my life." Kim is stunned. Doesn't know what to say. Doesn't know who he is. And he went on to say, "I went to school with Brock. We had a lot of classes together. And one day, I was ready to end my life. He said, I came to class that day and was prepared to do things later that day. And then Brock sat down beside me. He started talking, started making jokes. He engaged me. He talked to me. He made me feel like I was important, like I had value. And he single-handedly at that moment in my life changed the course of my life. Brock, just being Brock, made the difference in someone's life. What an incredible gift that everything he needed to do to help that young man on that day where he was feeling as down as he could feel without having a reason to go on living. And then he had a divine appointment with Brock, who through his laughter, his care, his humor, saved him. What greater gift can a family have than that? And that's part of the reason he went to college, to care for others. And while at college, he heard about a program called Jack.org. And if you look it up, this is what the statement says. This is Canada's only charity training and empowering young leaders to revolutionize mental health. Suicide is still the leading health-related cause of death for young people in Canada. 1 in 7 young people in Canada report having suicidal thoughts, to say nothing of the ones who don't report. This year, 150,000 will act on their thoughts by attempting suicide, and for hundreds of them, that attempt will be fatal. This needs to change, and we're leading the way. Brock and his friends got that up and running in Yarmouth because they realized there was a need that this chapter needed to have. You remember that professor I mentioned earlier who first met Brock and didn't think too much of it and thought he'd kind of wash out? Well, upon Brock's graduation, this professor came up to him and said, you know, you have taught me a lesson. You've taught me not to judge a book by its cover. And he thanked him for his time at the school and for giving him a wonderful lesson in humility to look at people differently. That's the influence Brock had. And friends, I want to gently encourage you, in your own way, practically reach out to people who are struggling, because we never know who's having one of those days. Do it with kindness, do it with humor. Engage people with a simple story, because we don't know whose child we're helping. The last gift I want to talk about is the gift that is just so evident. His great, great love for his family. Brock has a good-sized family. And I'm sorry for those of you who can't be with us here at this moment today. But if you talk to the family, you keep hearing the same stories. Uncle Dave and Uncle Rich tell you about this wonderful young man who was always full of life and joy and hilarity. He was funny, he was engaging, he was loyal. Sure, if you talk to Taylor, his cousin, he could be a bit of a jerk when he was little and rip her posters down, but she got him in trouble. But for Uncle Dave, he was just so proud of his nephew. Because he was smart, he was responsible, he never said a bad word. Maybe his mom babied him a little bit. But for Dave, his sister Kim, she taught her son about loyalty and about kindness. Uncle Rich remembers his nephew as being a great kid, always smiling, joking, happy to help you out. He had that beautiful smile and that beautiful soul. He remembers he was a kid who did his chores, washing the dishes or mowing the lawn, and he was happy and upbeat. And Rich saw that Brock learned about compassion and respect from his mom. If you talk to his aunt Barb and her children Matthew and Amanda, they remember this wonderful, sweet, polite, loving boy who brought such joy into their world. And what a gift to see John love so much and John to give such love. It's a wonderful gift to grow up in a family knowing you are loved and knowing you are cared for. Whether it's through your great-grandma, your papa, your aunts, your uncles. And two of the most powerful influences in his life were his grandma and his papa. They loved him like he was their son, not just their grandson. And what a gift it has been for them that when he went out to school out east, he was at their table just about every night. Helped that they did his laundry. But that gift of engaging your grandson, watching him grow up. And I love what Kim says. She says, you know, I raised this wonderful boy, and my mom raised this wonderful man. And friends, if there is a video that I wish we could have, would be Brock and his papa sitting around those tables having dinner and just kibitzing with each other to the point where Grandma had to go into the other room. We heard that wonderful letter from Barry talking about his son, who he was so proud of. And as a family, how could you not be proud of this young man who had so many father figures? John, his dad, Papa, his uncles. They were all so proud of him. And the mums in his life, his mom, his grandma, his aunts, his great-grandma, these ladies who were so proud of him. And for Kim and John, they were just so proud of who this young man was growing into. And what a gift to see their son grow up to such a fine man. And for Barry, knowing how much his son was loved and cherished by people is such a comfort. And it's a wonderful thing to know your son is loved and cared for. And what a gift to know, Kim, that you taught your son about compassion and kindness and empathy and loyalty. And he took that and he made a difference in other lives. And friends, the problem with having someone like Brock in your life is you're going to have what I call moments, where in the years and decades ahead, you're going to have these little flashbacks. You might remember driving him to Three Bears Nursery in Brantford, going swimming with him, seeing a little child play with Lego, and maybe teaching that child how to lay traps for his dad. Could see watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, remember how much he loved it, or his transition to Star Wars. Watching superhero movies with his grandma. Many times John used to say, Dr. Phil, Dr. Brock. John and Brock would look out the window on a rainy day and say, crap, the grass is going to grow. Just hanging out at the Binbrook Conservation Area with your friend. The simple things of cooking pork chops, remember how much you love them. Going to Swiss Chalet and wanting to order a quarter chicken white with fries and double sauce. That day he drove the 354 to the Challenger. Going out for Halloween with him. Just the many little things he did to make your life a better place. Friends, when these moments hit, you have a choice. You can say, it's too hard, I'm going to push it away, I can't do it. But friends, I'd encourage you to embrace those moments. Squeeze those moments. Hold those moments. Process those moments and say, what is it about Brock that I just love, I just miss, it just kills me? Is it his kindness? Is it his humor? Is it his gentleness? Is it his empathy? Is it his willingness to jump in there and help? And as you process the gift of that moment, I would encourage you to say a quiet word of thanks. And then I'd ask you to do something very brave. I'd ask you to reach out to Kim, to John, to Barry, to Grandma, to Papa, to his great-grandma, to each other and say, I was thinking about Brock today. Do you remember the time when? And you may say, Cal, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to make Kim cry. I'm going to make everybody upset. I don't want to do it. And friends, can I tell you, it's the opposite. Because when you call a family and say, I remember them, you tell them, I love them too. I miss them too. They live on in my heart and in my mind and who I am. And it's a gift that's precious. So love them enough to be in contact and say, I miss that guy. I love that guy. And tell them how you did some good in his name. What's hard about grief is it can feel like you're carrying a backpack full of rocks. And some days those rocks are sticking in your back and it weighs you down and it's just horrible. Friends, I'd encourage you, sometimes take that backpack off. Pull that rock out and identify what that rock is that day. Sometimes that rock is just, I miss him. I miss his laugh. I miss cleaning up the dirty dishes when he fed all his friends. Other days that rock is his kindness because you're going through a tough time and you knew that Brock would be there. Because friends, when we lose people, there's so many emotions that hit us. And what really sucks about grief is we don't just lose the person, but we lose that little bit of each other only they brought out. And every family functions different. And it's so hard when there's that empty chair that Brock would have sat in. So friends, acknowledge that. Talk about it. As you wake up in the morning and you're feeling different things, say to the people around you, today's a Brock day. just feeling sad, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling numb, or I'm feeling lost. Because life now has given you a limp. And you walk with this limp, and the limp right now is searing, agonizing pain. Because everywhere you move, you feel it. But over time, your body will start adjusting, and a limp isn't quite so painful, but the limp is there. And sometimes people will say to you, well, what's with the limp? And they say, well, let me tell you. His name is Brock. He was an absolute joy in my life. And he's not here the way he used to be here. But let me tell you about what he did when he was here. And friends, that limp is a cherished part of your life now. And the pain will decrease. And the memories will get stronger. But it's a story worth telling. I want to end by just telling you a story about Jesus. Jesus was a bit of an odd duck in the religious community, and they kept questioning why he was doing what he was doing, because he was hanging around all the wrong people. People who drank too much, people who ate too much, people who were known sinners. And the religious people just didn't know what to do with him. So one day, one of the religious professionals came up and he asked Jesus a question. He said, what do you got to do to get eternal life? Jesus looks at him and says, well, what does the Bible say? And it said, well, love God with all you got and love your neighbor. Jesus says, well, if you knew the answer, why did you ask me? Well, he didn't say idiot, but why? Then the guy was a little embarrassed and he said, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus told, I think, one of the most profound stories. He says there was a guy traveling alone in a bad spot, and he got jumped. Not only did he get jumped, but he got robbed. Not only did he get robbed, he got stripped naked of his clothes. He's a naked, bleeding man. And the first few people who came by were kind of religious people, high up people in the church, and they saw this mess, and they just kept going. But then this other guy comes. We know him as the Good Samaritan. And he did the good before him, and he helped the guy. And I like that when Jesus is telling a story about what it means to love people, is you practically help people as God did. You do the good before you. You help the people in need. And I love that yesterday, Kim and the family heard that story from that wonderful young man, that on a day when he needed somebody to stop and help, Brock was that guy. He just sat with him, he talked with him, he engaged him, he let him know he was of value and importance. And we don't know how many other people that Brock did that for. So friends, I'm going to encourage you to care well for each other. Be kind to yourself. Try not to get caught up in that, if I should have done this or I could have done that game. Care well for his mom. Care well for John and his dad. Care well for each other. I'm going to ask you to join me now as we close in prayer. Lord, today is one of those awful days. A day when we remember someone who was our world. A son, a grandson, a great-grandson, a nephew, a cousin, a friend. Our lives have changed, Lord. So in the midst of this tragedy, bring some good. Let others live differently. Help us to be like Brock, being kind, being thoughtful, making a difference in people's lives. Pray, Lord, that we would help you, or that we would let you be our help and our comfort in these difficult times. So, Lord, we thank you again for the gift of Brock, the gift that will remain in our lives and how we act and how we treat others. So, Lord, we give Brock back to you. We do this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Friends, thank you for being with us. And thank you. Friends, if you would like to make your way out, you're free to do that.